Hello everyone! Thank you for tuning in to the Wasabi Aquarium channel. Today's video is building a small-sized aquarium project part 2, layout composition. In part 1 of this series, we went through the procedures of resetting an existing aquarium as the first step in building out a new layout. If you haven't seen part 1 yet, I strongly recommend you do so before watching the rest of this video, as part 1 also goes into detail on the features and characteristics of small-sized aquariums, as well as techniques and things to watch out for when building a small aquarium. So I know it may take a bit of your time, but I will leave a link in the description below, so please watch part 1 and then come back to this video. So, in part 2 of this series, we will be placing layout materials such as stones and driftwood. As we do so, we will also explain things to watch out for when placing these materials in small aquariums. For small aquariums like this Dua System Aqua 30 that we will be using today, the most obvious characteristic is the lack of depth. The measurements are 30 centimeters in width, 20 centimeters in depth, and 30 centimeters in height, so it's almost a 30 centimeter cubic aquarium with 10 centimeters less in depth. This tank is actually an all-in-one aquarium, so there's a filter at the back. But please do note that all of the characteristics and things to watch out for that we will touch upon in detail today can also be applied to normal 30 centimeter small-sized tanks. So this video should be helpful to everyone who is interested in building small layouts, so please make sure to stay tuned until the very end. As we briefly touched upon in part 1 of this series, the most important difference from building 60 centimeter, 90 centimeter, or 120 centimeter aquariums is that for a 30 centimeter aquarium, it is important to be somewhat extreme when designing your composition. If you make it too broad or try to be safe, it tends to end up looking bland. So, in order to portray what you are envisioning, it is important to be more bold than usual to visualize your imagination into this small space. At the same time, if you put too much effort into perfecting every detail, the starting process becomes very tedious, and if your layout materials are placed very precisely, your aquarium ends up being very difficult to maintain, which is something we want to avoid. So, as the theme of this project, I will try to build out a composition that is both aesthetically pleasing and very easy to maintain. If you go too far on either side of the scale, it'll compromise the other to a certain extent. So it is essential to find a good middle ground that synergizes both aspects. A good balance is the key to a long-lasting aquarium. So, without further ado, let's move on to the actual building out the composition. So first of all, we will start putting together the base of the floor. In order to follow today's theme of making it as easy as possible to maintain in the future, we will not be using any sand for this floor. As you may know, it is generally a common method to use sand when composing the floor of small aquariums, but at the same time, this sand ends up making the aquarium very hard and tiring to maintain. So, if you do have the time to carefully maintain your new layout, I would recommend using sand to make your floor look more spacious, but to follow today's theme of making it easy to maintain, we will not be using any sand for this floor today. So, not having the sand allows us to be bold and playful when putting together the floor base. So let's start with the Amazonia supplement. Today, we will be using version 2. For almost all of our recent layouts, we have used these Amazonia version 2s, and we've been able to gain a lot of experience and knowledge about these, and we will most likely be using the version 2s for a while for our layouts inside our stores. So now, let's start laying these out. Regarding the amount, there's about 50 grams for a 9-liter bag. So you calculate the ratio based on the size of your aquarium. For today's tank, we will be using a little bit over 2 liters of soil. So it'll be about 13 or 14 grams of Amazonia. The next step will also be the same as our usual routine, and we'll be inserting the Clear Super and Bacter 100. These have proven to be very effective in rooting and the longevity of your soil, especially in the early stages of building out your aquarium. So, as a means to activate the bacteria on the bottom floor, the Bacter 100 is actually dormant live bacteria, and Clear Super 100 is food for them to vitalize. So it is essential to use these two as a pair. So we'll be applying 1 teaspoon of each. Now we will go ahead and throw in the Amazonia version 2. I'm sure most of you have noticed by now, but creating this base floor has been extremely easy, mainly due to the fact that we don't have the sand to worry about splitting the layout into different sections. If we were to do these procedures for this aquarium, we would need to create stone walls in advance around our layout materials, so there's a pretty big difference here. I personally believe that for small aquariums, it is important to be able to enjoy the aquarium without too much pressure on the maintenance side. And that is another reason why we are building this layout with the theme of making it easy to both build and maintain. Of course, the design will still be as well thought out as possible, but as you know, once you start building a layout, you usually start perfecting every detail until you realize that it's too difficult to maintain. That's just human nature. So I will try to find the best of both sides of the spectrum to make this also an aesthetically enjoyable composition. I do have a pretty good image of the composition in my head, and we will be pursuing with a concave composition where we will plant water plants on both sides. So the soil on both sides will be piled pretty high. In terms of the amount of soil, I would say it is best to instill as much soil as possible. And this is the key to maintaining a healthy aquarium for a long time. Especially for this aquarium, we will be planting rooted aquatic plants. So the more soil you have, the more space you can secure for the roots to grow and firmly position themselves in order to stay healthy. So we will try to mount the soil as high as possible. At the same time, however, making the soil too steep will end up making the maintenance procedures and also the building procedures very difficult and technical, so there won't be too much of a slope. We will just be stacking the soil as high as possible within the space that we are given. Also, having a good amount of soil actually helps maintain a steady, healthy water quality. The soil makes the water low in acidity, which is very healthy for the growth of your water plants, and the lack of soil can quickly lead to the pH level getting too high. and a good amount of soil is definitely key to maintaining a healthy environment for your water plants. Next, we will use this sand flatter to smooth out the base floor. One thing to note here is it would be better to make the front end lower than the back end. By creating a light slope, these will lean forward, and if you make the front end too thick, you'll need to make the back even thicker. So try to make the front end a bit thinner than usual. Now we will go ahead and place our layout materials inside the tank. We will be using both stones and driftwood for today's layout, but we will only be using one piece of wood. Of course, using multiple pieces of each will add detail and make your layout look more professional, but at the same time, having multiple pieces of driftwood can also be annoying when trying to go through the maintenance procedures, such as the twigs latching onto you or the wood blocking you from trimming the plants, and more. So, to keep things simple, as the original motto of this video, we will be placing one piece of driftwood inside this aquarium. So, to visually make the most out of this driftwood, it would definitely be wise to choose a visually strong and impactful piece, like this one. This goes for the other layout materials too, but the less pieces, the more strong and impactful each piece should be. So this piece here is very detailed, and this alone will probably grab the viewer's attention. Next, for stones, we will be using ADA's Ruo stones. The details on the surfaces of Ruo stones are especially very aesthetic and will make your layout look complex, and they're especially a good match for small-sized aquariums. If your stones are too smooth on the surfaces, it becomes a bit too simple and makes it difficult to bring out the complexity. So it would definitely be better to use stones with unique details. As you can see, I am currently building this layout on what I can see diagonally. So I'll be moving to the front end of the tank later to balance the materials from the correct perspective. Once again, these procedures are so much easier when we don't have the sand to start off with. The concave composition, which consists of 2 blocks of water plants on each side and an empty space in the middle, not having the sand allows you to proceed without building walls between each section, especially between the stones, and skipping that one step has made this entire journey so much easier. This is a technique unique to small aquariums, but I have intentionally chosen a piece of driftwood that arches. This arch creates a thin path in the middle, and it makes the space in the middle look deeper than it actually is. Very simple, but also very effective. Now, I will move to the front end and rebalance a few things before we proceed. So now I've made just a few adjustments on several parts to make it look as visually pleasing as possible from the front. I've also added one more stone over here. This stone actually effectively separates the front end and back end of the aquarium and adds more depth and clarity of the layout. On this side, I've also intentionally placed stones that are low in height to make it light on this end. So overall, this layout is very simple, as you can see. And I've used 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Oh wait, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, so only 8 stones in total. and one large piece of driftwood that arches to complement the spacious area in the middle. It would have been great to maybe sprinkle some sand in the middle to make the small path white to make it visibly more pleasing, but for this time around we will go ahead and fill this area with plants and place rooted water plants on both sides to make this aquarium as easy to maintain as possible. But it's definitely great to have these options in mind on how to expand your layout from here for when you have the chance to do so in the future. Now let's take a look at our composition from the front. You've mostly been seeing this composition from above or diagonally, so now you can finally see the depth that we've been trying to create with the driftwood arcing over here, and the stones that are peeking in at the back. The complex surfaces of the stones visually also add more details, so overall it is very easy to create a simple but professional looking composition, even in aquariums as small as this one. One thing to note that I should mention here, especially for concave compositions, is to be careful not to make the layout symmetrical, with the small path and spacious area right in the middle. A symmetric layout is something you absolutely want to avoid when creating your layout, so make sure to have the small path closer to either one of the sides. As you can see, I've created the space towards the right and made the path turn towards the left to create the visual depth. Now let's take a look at the composition from the top. I think you can also see very clearly from here how we've laid out the materials intentionally asymmetrical, with more stones on this side and more space on the other. Of course, since we only have 20 centimeters in depth, there isn't much room for water plants. We will also make the most out of this situation though by choosing the correct plants that are fit for this layout. So please stay tuned for the next video in this series as well. As you can see, this layout is very easy even for beginners, so I'd recommend anyone to try building this layout as a means to develop your skill set. I hope you enjoyed today's video. We went all the way from creating our base floor to laying out the materials including driftwood and Rio stones in detail. The next episode in this series will be mainly about choosing the correct water plants that would best fit this aquarium, and also how to correctly plant them from the correct placement to the amount per block given the small amount of space. Of course, even after the aquarium is finished, we will continue to create videos as part of this series to observe the development and growth of the plants and perhaps take you through the maintenance procedures, so please make sure to stay tuned to our channel. As you saw, when building out your composition for small-sized aquariums, making them too detailed can make all steps that follow to be too difficult and tedious, especially during the maintenance procedures, such as the twigs of the wood blocking you from trimming the plants. So it was very important to keep the layout as simple as possible in order for this layout to be something easily challengeable to anyone. Please feel free to leave any questions or inquiries regarding the content we covered today, or any questions around building small-sized aquariums in general. Also, leave any requests on this content that you would like for us to cover. We may not be able to reply to each comment individually, but we will try to create new content based on the common questions that we receive frequently, so please also subscribe to the Wasabi Aquarium channel if you found this video helpful. We will continue to create videos that provide help and knowledge around creating and maintaining beautiful aquariums, so your continuous support and the like button would be very much appreciated. That is it for today, and see you in the next video. Goodbye!